On the remote research station of Xyler 9, the air hummed with the steady pulse of machinery. The station floated silently above a barren, rust-colored planet, surrounded by jagged rocks and icy clouds. Inside, the Zorvith collective scientists moved quickly and efficiently, their long, thin limbs adjusting complex devices that glowed with strange energy. They spoke in soft clicks and whirs, voices like the scratching of metal on metal. 3 humans stood in the center of the main chamber. Edmund was tall and lean, with sharp eyes that seemed to study everything at once. Beatrice was smaller but carried herself with quiet confidence, her hands never still as she observed the equipment around her. Rupert was broad-shouldered and steady, the kind of man who seemed unshakable even in the worst storms. Together, they formed a team that had faced danger before, but nothing like the calculated, cold precision of the Zorviths. The Zorviths had built this station specifically for the purpose of testing the limits of other species' minds. They were certain humans would break quickly. They had studied humans from afar for decades and believed they understood them completely. Now they were eager to confirm it. Edmund looked around at the machines, reading the tiny lights and spinning dials as if he could already see their purpose. "It's a cage," he said quietly, almost to himself. "But it isn't strong enough to trap what it doesn't understand." Beatrice glanced at him and nodded slightly, a small smile on her lips. Rupert, standing beside them, just clenched his fists. The Zorvith overseer, a tall figure with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that shimmered like molten metal, stepped forward. It moved with a deliberate grace, its voice deep and resonant, vibrating through the chamber. "Humans, you will be tested. Your minds will bend, and your will break. It is inevitable. Resistance is not designed for your species." Edmund raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Beatrice tilted her head, her gaze steady and calm. Rupert's jaw tightened, and he looked the overseer directly in the eye, as if to challenge it silently. The testing began with lights that pierced their vision and sounds that hummed through their bones. The Zorviths called it neural mapping, but the humans understood it as a form of mental pressure. Visions appeared in their minds, some strange and beautiful, others terrifying and confusing. Memories they had never shared with each other played like films on invisible screens. Emotions surged, anger, fear, joy, and sorrow, all at once. Edmund closed his eyes briefly and focused on his breathing. He could feel the machine probing his thoughts, pulling at his memories, trying to find a weak point. He reminded himself of every small detail he had learned in his life, every lesson that had made him who he was. He thought of the small village he had grown up in, the river where he had fished as a boy, the smell of wet grass after a storm. The images were simple, ordinary, but they were his. And no machine, no matter how clever, could take that away. Beatrice, meanwhile, had already started noticing patterns in the way the machine interacted with their minds. Each pulse, each flicker of light, followed a rhythm. She could see it now, the gaps and pauses in the logic. If the Zorviths thought they were clever, they had not accounted for humans' ability to notice small patterns and use them. She began to focus on these rhythms, imagining herself moving through them like water flowing around rocks, untouchable and free. Rupert, ever the observer, kept his eyes open. He watched the machine's small movements, the subtle vibrations of the floor, the lights in the Zorvith's eyes as they manipulated the controls. He saw doubt in them now and then, quick flashes of uncertainty, which the aliens tried to hide. Rupert realized that the machine was not just probing the human mind, it was revealing the insecurities of the aliens themselves. That knowledge gave him calm. Hours passed, or perhaps it was minutes, for time felt strange in that chamber. The humans stood, unmoving, yet fully aware. The Zorviths pushed harder, sending visions more vivid, sounds more piercing. The chamber seemed to tilt and warp, as if reality itself were bending. But still, the humans held their ground. At one point, the overseer increased the intensity, sending a wave of mental pressure that made the air feel heavy and thick. Edmund's head pounded, and memories not his own flashed in front of his eyes. Beatrice felt her mind tangle with strange patterns of thought, while Rupert's hands shook slightly. But none of them cried out. None of them bent. Instead, they waited, watching, learning, understanding. Edmund whispered, so softly that even the machines could not hear. They think they are inside our heads, but it is we who are seeing everything. Beatrice's eyes flicked to him, a spark of agreement. Rupert's lips tightened into a small grin. The three of them had realized something the Zorviths had not considered. The human mind was not just a target, it was a weapon. As the day wore on, the Zorviths grew frustrated. Their calculations were precise, yet their predictions failed. Every new wave of mental pressure was met with calm, focus, and subtle countermeasures the humans did not even need to explain. Edmund would imagine a wall in his mind, Beatrice would adjust the rhythm of her focus, and Rupert would anchor himself to the steady beat of his heart. The machine, designed to break minds, now struggled against a force it could not measure. By the time the first cycle of testing ended, the chamber was silent except for the low hum of the machines. The Zorvith overseer stared at the humans, confusion flickering across its face. This is impossible, it said. All predictions failed. The humans. Edmund opened his eyes slowly and looked at the overseer. You thought we would break. You thought we would obey. But you underestimated something you cannot understand. Our minds do not bend. We adapt. We survive. Beatrice stepped forward, her voice calm and steady. You cannot break what you do not own. You cannot control what you cannot predict. Every attempt to crush us only shows the limits of your own power. Rupert simply nodded, his presence radiating a quiet strength. And now, he said, we are ready to see how far your own machines can reach when they meet minds that refuse to break. The Zorvith scientists exchanged nervous glances. They had expected fear, screams, compliance. Instead, they had met calm, awareness, and an unsettling confidence. The humans stood tall, and though they were exhausted, their spirits were unshaken. The very act of trying to break them had revealed something terrifying to the aliens, that the human mind could endure, adapt, and even turn the attack back on those who sought to dominate it. And in that silent chamber, a quiet tension settled over both species. The experiment, meant to humiliate and dominate, had instead become a lesson the Zorviths had not anticipated. The humans were not fragile, they were not predictable, and they were far stronger than anyone had thought. The first part of the experiment was over, but something had shifted. The humans had survived intact, and the aliens had glimpsed the unpredictable resilience of their captives. In the deep recesses of their minds, Edmund, Beatrice, and Rupert shared the same thought. This was only the beginning, and the humans would emerge stronger than the aliens could imagine. The station hummed quietly, machines glowing softly, but now the hum carried a new meaning. It was no longer a symbol of control. It was a challenge. Days passed inside the dimly lit chamber of the Xylar 9 station. The machines hummed and glowed, sending waves of energy that reached deep into the humans' minds. The Zorviths observed from their control platforms, confident that each pulse, each flicker of light, would eventually break the humans. They had done this before with other species, and the results had always been the same: surrender, confusion, collapse. But humans were different. Edmund, Beatrice, and Rupert stood in the center, surrounded by swirling lights and vibrating sounds that made the air feel thick. Each wave of mental pressure was like a storm trying to twist their thoughts, but they held firm. Edmund focused on breathing, letting each inhale and exhale anchor him to reality. He could feel the visions attempting to infiltrate his mind, memories not his own, scenes that made no sense, voices whispering doubts, but he refused to give them power. Beatrice's eyes flicked constantly to the devices around her, even though she could not touch them. She was seeing patterns no one else noticed. Every pulse, every vibration, every flicker of the lights had a rhythm, a hidden logic. The aliens thought they were being subtle, that their manipulation was perfect. But Beatrice could read it. She began to anticipate each surge of the machine, predicting when it would strike and how it would try to twist her thoughts. She imagined herself as a bird, weaving through the invisible nets of the machine, untangled and free. Rupert, on the other hand, focused on the smallest reactions of the machine itself. A light flickering slightly too long, a faint vibration that did not match the others, the almost imperceptible hum shifting in tone. These were clues. He realized the machine designed to attack their minds could also be attacked. If he could adjust his focus, he could create tiny contradictions in the neural patterns, forcing the device to hesitate, then falter. It was like a game of chess, played entirely inside the mind. The Zorvith overseer, still confident, increased the intensity of the waves. The chamber seemed to distort, shadows stretching unnaturally across the walls. Colors twisted in ways that were almost painful, and sounds reached a pitch that made even the human's teeth ache. The aliens' projections became more vivid, showing memories of loss, fear, and failure. They tried to create doubt, to make the humans question their own minds. Edmund felt a shadow of the memories, but held fast. He focused on small, real things: his mother's kitchen, the smell of bread baking, the warmth of sunlight on his face. These were simple things, but they anchored him. He whispered to himself, "You cannot take this from me. You cannot control what I know is real." He could feel the machine straining, unsure how to reach him, as if it had never encountered a mind that refused to bend. Beatrice, meanwhile, had started adjusting the rhythms of her responses. When the machine sent a pulse, she mirrored it in her mind, creating small echoes that the device could not process. The illusions became less effective as she twisted them slightly, bending them back toward her own understanding. The Zorviths noticed small irregularities, but they dismissed them as minor anomalies. They had no idea that humans could manipulate the attack from within. Rupert's efforts were subtler, but just as powerful. By observing the tiny shifts in the machine's vibrations, he began feeding it contradictions. When a thought was pushed into his mind, he created a mental reflection that the machine could not distinguish from reality. Every attempt to control him caused the device to hesitate, and each hesitation made the next surge weaker. It was not immediate, but the pattern was clear. The humans were fighting back, using the machine itself as a weapon against the Zorviths. As the hours stretched into days, the Zorviths grew frustrated. They were intelligent, meticulous, and patient, but they had never seen a species adapt so quickly. Every human reaction, every calm defiance, undermined their expectations. Edmund's serene focus, Beatrice's intuitive pattern recognition, and Rupert's quiet observation combined into a force the Zorviths could not calculate. In one moment, a particularly intense vision struck Edmund, showing a failure he had never experienced but could imagine vividly, a loss that felt real in every fiber of his being. Fear prickled his mind, but he held on to a simple thought. He was still himself. Nothing they could do would change that. He breathed deeply and let the vision wash over him, without giving it control. Slowly, the image dissolved, and Edmund's calm remained unbroken. Beatrice saw a sequence of lights meant to confuse her, a series of flashing colors designed to create panic. She focused, noting the intervals between each flicker. Then she began to anticipate them, shifting her thoughts slightly before the machine even acted. The lights seemed to stumble, their rhythm faltering, and she could feel the machine struggling to maintain control. She smiled faintly. Rupert noticed that the very air in the chamber seemed heavier when the machine sent its strongest pulses. He realized that the intensity of the attacks was linked to the machine's internal feedback, and he found ways to exploit it. By changing his focus just enough, he could make the device overcompensate, creating gaps that even the humans themselves could navigate safely. The mental battle was silent but powerful, and the humans' mastery grew with every attempt. The Zorviths were beginning to sense something they had not anticipated. Their projections, meant to dominate, were now being twisted subtly. Their calculations were failing. Edmund's calm defiance seemed almost physical, a wall that the machine could not penetrate. Beatrice's intuition acted like a compass, guiding them through the chaos. Rupert's observations and adjustments were creating errors the Zorviths could not correct. One of the younger Zorvith scientists spoke quietly to another, its clicks hurried and nervous. "This is not supposed to happen. They should be broken." The calculations, the limits they should have, the words trailed off. Their eyes, once full of confidence, now showed a flicker of fear. For the first time, the overseer seemed uncertain. Edmund, noticing the hesitation, allowed himself a small thought, just for the humans. They think they are in control, but control is an illusion. We adapt. We survive. They cannot break what refuses to bend. Beatrice's mind worked quietly beside him, weaving through the signals of the machine. She felt the pattern shifting, like water moving through rocks. She whispered to herself, "Every attempt to trap us is a path we can follow, a path we can twist." Rupert, ever steady, kept the balance. Let them push. Let them try. Each strike they send only teaches us more. Each attempt only makes us stronger. The chamber was alive with a clash of minds, but the humans stood at the center, unbroken, aware and learning. What the Zorviths had intended as torture was becoming a lesson. Humans were unpredictable, resilient, and capable of turning even the most precise machines against their creators. By the end of the second day, the Overseer looked at the humans with a mixture of frustration and disbelief. "Impossible," it whispered. "All our predictions, all our calculations, they are wrong." "How?" Edmund's eyes met the Overseer's, calm and steady. "You underestimated us. You thought fear would break us. You thought illusions would control us. But you forgot one thing. Humans are not machines. We are not predictable. And our minds bend nothing but the impossible." Beatrice stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. "Your machines cannot break what refuses to be broken. They cannot dominate what refuses to be tamed. Every effort to control us only reveals the limits of your own design." Rupert nodded, a quiet strength radiating from him. "And now we know your machine. We know your patterns. And soon, you will see it can be turned against you." The Zorviths recoiled slightly, uncertainty spreading through their ranks. For the first time, the humans were not merely surviving, they were gaining power. Inside their minds, the Zorviths' devices were faltering, their precise control slipping. They had thought to dominate, but in the process, they were learning a dangerous truth. Humans could fight inside their own minds, and the longer the experiment continued, the more they would understand how to win. And in the silent spaces between the waves of light and sound, Edmund, Beatrice, and Rupert shared a thought. The experiment was no longer theirs to endure, it was theirs to master. The humans had turned the mind games into a battlefield where they were not only participants but strategists, learning the limits of the machine and, unknowingly, teaching the Zorviths the limits of their own arrogance. The chamber on Xylar 9 hummed with an intensity that made the air almost solid. Lights flickered and pulsed across the walls, vibrating in a rhythm that had once been terrifying. The Zorviths watched from their elevated control platforms, eyes glowing with a mix of expectation and impatience. They believed their machines were perfect, that their control over the human mind was absolute. But they were about to discover that perfection had limits when faced with something unpredictable. Edmund, Beatrice, and Rupert stood in the center, surrounded by the machines that had been designed to break them. At first, the humans had simply resisted, absorbing the waves of psychic pressure and holding on to their thoughts. But now, after days of observation and subtle adaptation, they had learned something far more dangerous. They could use the machine against its creators. Beatrice was the first to test the idea. She began creating tiny paradoxes in her own mind. When the machine pushed a thought of fear into her consciousness, she twisted it slightly, sending it back as a contradiction. The pulse of the device wavered. The projection in the chamber flickered, and for a moment, the Zorviths paused, their precise movements faltering. Beatrice felt the small victory ripple through her mind, a spark of satisfaction. Edmund noticed immediately. He had been observing the way the machine's pulses moved, how each attempt to control them followed a pattern. Now, the pattern was broken, and it was beautiful. He allowed a small smile, though no one could see it but him. Human creativity under pressure could not be calculated or contained. The Zorviths, for all their intelligence, could not predict the imagination that now flowed freely inside the minds of the humans. Rupert added his own touch. He began to feed the machine contradictions deliberately, altering the rhythm of his thoughts just enough to confuse its calculations. The mental projections that had once been terrifying now seemed chaotic, shifting unpredictably and breaking apart in ways the Zorviths could not control. Rupert's calm, steady mind acted as a channel for the paradoxes, amplifying their effect. The chamber became a strange battlefield. Shadows twisted unnaturally on the walls, echoing with colors that seemed to move independently. The Zorviths projected visions of monstrous fears, personal failures, and impossible horrors, each meant to crush the humans' resolve. But instead of fear, the humans responded with ingenuity. Each projection became a puzzle, a test of logic that could be twisted back on its creator. Edmund felt one of the visions attempt to trap him in an endless loop of despair. He smiled faintly, recognizing the repetition. He imagined a wall in his mind, not to block the projection, but to redirect it. The loops bounced off his thoughts, reflecting back toward the machine, creating glitches in the system. The Zorviths noticed immediately. Their clicks and whispers grew hurried and sharp, voices tense with confusion. Beatrice, watching the patterns of light on the walls, realized she could predict the machine's next move. She sent tiny false signals into her own neural pathway, small illusions that the machine interpreted as real reactions. Every pulse it sent became tangled with the contradictions she had inserted. The more the Zorviths tried to force compliance, the more the machine destabilized. Rupert, standing steady, began experimenting with timing. The device relied on precise intervals, subtle sequences that were meant to overwhelm the human mind. By shifting his focus slightly ahead of or behind the machine's pulses, he created feedback loops. The projections now began to distort before they even reached him. Shadows that were meant to intimidate now flickered and bent strangely. Colors that should have struck terror seemed almost playful, twisting in ways the Zorviths could not control. The Zorviths' confidence began to crumble. They had expected resistance, yes, but not creativity, not the ability of their victims to manipulate the very tool of their oppression. Their calculations were failing, and with each failed calculation, their frustration grew. For the first time, the humans were not only surviving, they were mastering the battlefield. Edmund observed the changes in the chamber, noting the chaos spreading through the projections. "They think they are controlling the storm," he murmured to Beatrice and Rupert, "but the storm is ours now. Every push they make only strengthens our advantage." Beatrice nodded slightly. "Every attempt to frighten us is a signal. Every illusion is a clue. We are learning faster than they can adjust." Rupert's calm voice cut through the tension. "And the more they push, the more they expose themselves. They do not know how to fight in a space where the rules are ours." The Zorvith overseer, usually precise and imposing, began to show signs of unease. Its movements were hesitant, its clicks fragmented. "Impossible," it muttered. "The calculations, they cannot how." Its voice wavered like a machine struggling against its own failure. Inside the chamber, the humans continued their silent assault. Edmund's mind was a calm center, redirecting the worst projections. Beatrice's intuition twisted the lights and sounds, feeding them back into the system as contradictions. Rupert observed every detail, exploiting even the smallest errors. Together, they turned the tools of their torment into instruments of chaos. One of the Zorvith assistants hesitated, looking at the overseer. "It's failing," it whispered, fear creeping into its clicks. "The humans, they are adapting. We cannot predict." Edmund allowed himself a small smile. "They cannot control us. They cannot calculate our creativity. Every move they make gives us more power." Beatrice added, "Your patterns are clear now. Every projection has a weakness. Every pulse has a gap. We do not need to break ourselves to survive. We simply need to use what you have created against you." Rupert's hands relaxed slightly, but his mind remained sharp. The machine is no longer a weapon for them. It is a mirror, reflecting back their own limitations. The chamber flickered and pulsed wildly, colors and shadows twisting in ways that were both beautiful and terrifying. The Zorviths tried to stabilize the system, sending commands and recalibrating controls, but each attempt only made the chaos grow. The paradoxes and contradictions inserted by the humans amplified every flaw, creating a cascading effect that the aliens could not repair in time. Edmund, feeling the machine falter, whispered, "The moment they thought they held the advantage, we turned it into ours. Their fear becomes our tool. Their control becomes our freedom." Beatrice's mind worked tirelessly, weaving the illusions and projections into a web that trapped the Zorvith's logic. Each attempt to regain control only fed into the chaos. The humans moved like dancers, step by step, through the storm of mental projections, twisting them, redirecting them, and learning from them. Rupert watched the Overseer's hesitation grow into panic. The Zorvith had never encountered a species that could fight in this way, that could turn attack into defense, that could transform fear into strategy. And now, with each failed attempt, the humans grew stronger, more confident, more unbreakable. The chamber became a place where the impossible was ordinary. Shadows and colors danced unpredictably, sounds warped and twisted, and the very air seemed alive with energy. The humans stood at the center, calm and resolute, aware of every flicker, every vibration, every movement. They were no longer simply resisting, they were leading. The Zorvith's projections faltered, breaking apart under the weight of paradoxes and contradictions. The Overseer's voice rose in sharp tones, a mixture of frustration and disbelief. They cannot, this is not possible." Edmund looked at the Overseer calmly. "Possible or impossible does not matter. We are not bound by your rules. We are not confined by your expectations. Your machine cannot break minds that refuse to break. And your own systems, they will bend before ours do." Beatrice added, "You wanted to dominate us, to control us. But you have shown your weakness. Your tools are now ours to study. And every moment you continue, you give us more insight, more power, more freedom." Rupert nodded. "And soon you will see the consequences. This chamber, your machine, your carefully calculated attacks, they are no longer threats. They are lessons. And we have learned them all." The humans smiled faintly, standing in the center of the swirling chaos. They had turned the tables. The machine that was meant to dominate them now faltered. The projections that were meant to terrify them now confused their creators. Human creativity under pressure had proven unstoppable, unpredictable, and uncontainable. And in that moment, a new truth became clear to the Zorviths. They had not been testing the humans. They had been revealing their own limitations, their own arrogance, and the unstoppable force that was the human mind. The chamber on Xylar 9 was alive with chaos. Lights pulsed erratically, humming machines vibrated in strange rhythms, and the air seemed thick with tension. The Zorviths, who had once controlled the entire experiment with cold precision, now stumbled under the weight of their own device. Every attempt they made to dominate the humans was met with unexpected resistance, and each failure made their frustration grow. Edmund, standing calmly at the center, noticed the change immediately. The pulses and projections that had once assaulted his mind were now faltering. Colors twisted strangely, shadows bent unpredictably, and sounds fractured into strange, jagged echoes. The machine, designed to enforce control, was becoming unstable. He looked at Beatrice and Rupert, seeing the same realization reflected in their eyes. Beatrice took a deep breath, centering herself. She had been studying the patterns for days, noting every response, every fluctuation in the machine's rhythm. She understood now that the device was not just a weapon, it was vulnerable. And if used correctly, it could be turned against the Zorviths themselves. With careful focus, Beatrice projected a mental mirror into her own thoughts, a reflection designed to bounce back every psychic intrusion. Each pulse that the machine sent into her mind now returned to the source, magnified and distorted. The Zorviths, who had once watched the humans' reactions with confident detachment, began to experience the torment they had designed. Confusion spread across their faces as visions meant for the humans now struck their own minds. Edmund noticed the first signs of panic. The Overseer, tall and commanding, faltered in its movements. Its clicks and whirs became sharp and uneven, a signal that control was slipping. For the first time, the humans saw fear in the eyes of a species that had never admitted it. Edmund's lips curved into a small smile. This was what they had been waiting for, the moment when the hunters became the hunted. Rupert moved with quiet precision. He approached the main console, his hands steady despite the chaos surrounding them. With careful timing, he began to disengage the machine, overriding its circuits and shutting down its connections. Every panel he touched responded smoothly, as if the device itself recognized the shift in control. Lights dimmed, pulses slowed, and the once terrifying projections wavered, collapsing under the humans' combined focus. The Zorvith scientists tried to react. They attempted to stabilize the machine, sending commands and recalibrating settings, but their efforts were frantic and disorganized. Each movement they made only deepened the chaos. Visions twisted into impossible forms, colors collided in blinding flashes, and sounds overlapped until they became unbearable. The very device that had been built to dominate the humans now held the aliens captive. Edmund observed calmly. He could feel the ebb and flow of energy in the chamber, the patterns of the machine as they faltered and failed. "It is almost over," he murmured. "Their own tool has become their prison." Beatrice nodded, keeping her mental mirror steady, reflecting every intrusion back at the aggressors. Rupert continued his work, methodically shutting down systems and freeing the humans from any remaining influence. The Zorvith overseer tried to speak, its voice trembling with an unfamiliar emotion. "We cannot control it," it staggered, clutching at the consoles, as visions of its own fears and failures assaulted its mind. The other scientists were no better. Some screamed silently, their mental defenses collapsing under the mirrored attacks. Shadows that had once terrified humans now twisted around the Zorviths, echoing their own insecurities and doubts. Beatrice felt a surge of satisfaction but kept her focus. One misstep could allow the Zorviths to regain control, even partially. She maintained the mirror, amplifying its effect with each wave of intrusion. Every pulse, every projection, every attempt to dominate was reflected back stronger than before. The chamber trembled as the machine strained, unable to process the paradoxes and contradictions now amplified by the humans' mental defenses. Rupert finally disengaged the last active connections. The machine shuddered, sparks flying along the edges of the console, and then fell silent. The projections dissolved into the air, leaving only a few lingering flashes of color. The Zorviths stumbled back, dazed and overwhelmed, their own creation having turned into a labyrinth from which there was no escape. Edmund took a deep breath, feeling the calm that came after the storm. "It's done," he said quietly. "They cannot harm us anymore. They are trapped in the system they built to dominate us." Beatrice lowered her focus slowly, keeping just enough of the mental mirror active to ensure the Zorviths remained under its influence. Rupert stepped back, arms crossed, observing the defeated aliens with steady composure. The chamber was quiet, save for the soft hum of emergency systems. The Zorviths, once confident and commanding, were disoriented and subdued. Some tried to move, but the lingering effects of the mirrored projections kept their minds off balance. Fear, confusion, and frustration radiated from them, a silent testament to their failure. Edmund, Beatrice, and Rupert exchanged a glance. No words were needed. The humans had endured what was meant to destroy them. They had faced mental torture, manipulations, and threats designed to bend their will, and they had turned every attack back on the aggressors. The hunters had become the hunted, and the humans stood free. Beatrice allowed herself a small smile, feeling a mixture of relief and triumph. "We didn't just survive," she said softly. "We controlled the battlefield. They are prisoners now, not us." Rupert nodded. "And it was not brute force that did it. It was awareness, observation, and understanding. We learned the system faster than they could adapt, and we used it against them." Edmund looked around the chamber, taking in the aftermath. Sparks from the console glowed faintly, lights flickered unevenly, and the Zorvith's machinery lay in partial disrepair. The humans had not destroyed the station, nor had they caused permanent harm. Instead, they had turned a tool of oppression into a lesson in resilience. "They will remember this," Edmund said. "Not just us, but what we can do. They will never forget that humans cannot be broken." The Zorvith overseer made a final attempt to speak, but its voice cracked under the strain of the mirrored projections. It could not control its own thoughts, could not regain dominance over the device. It stumbled backward, and the remaining scientists followed suit, their confidence shattered. The humans had not only survived, they had proven their minds were stronger than any machine. The chamber grew quiet, the tension slowly easing. Edmund, Beatrice, and Rupert stood together, their bodies tired, but their spirits unbroken. Outside, the barren landscape of Xylar 9 stretched endlessly, silent and cold, but inside, the humans had created a victory of the mind, a triumph of calm and strategy over chaos and intimidation. For the first time, the humans were no longer captives. They had turned the system of control into a cage for their captors. Every flicker of light, every pulse of energy, every image designed to terrify now worked against those who had intended to dominate. The Zorviths had learned too late that the human mind was not fragile, not predictable, and not easily contained. Edmund spoke quietly, his voice carrying a calm authority. "We have endured. They are trapped, but we are free. And now, they will see the limits of their own arrogance." Beatrice and Rupert nodded, each feeling the weight of victory settle in. In that chamber, surrounded by the broken and chaotic remains of the Zorvith machine, humanity had not only survived, they had reversed the roles. The predators, confident in their control, were now the prisoners. The humans had proven that endurance, intelligence, and unity could overcome even the most precise and terrifying forms of mental assault. And as the 3 humans looked at the dazed, trapped aliens, a quiet thought passed through their minds. This was proof that humanity could endure anything, adapt to any challenge, and even turn the tools of oppression into instruments of freedom. The collapse was complete. The machine no longer threatened them. The Zorviths were no longer in control. Humanity had not only survived, it had triumphed. The doors of the chamber slid open with a soft hiss, revealing the long, metallic corridors of the Xylar 9 station. Edmund, Beatrice, and Rupert stepped out carefully, their movements steady and calm. The lights above flickered gently, casting long shadows across the walls, but the humans seemed untouched by the chaos they had just overcome. Their minds were clear, their hearts steady, and their determination unshaken. Behind them, the Zorvith scientists struggled to recover from the collapse of their machine. Their once confident movements were now hesitant, their glowing eyes flickering with confusion and fear. They had believed themselves the masters of minds, the supreme intellects capable of dominating any species they encountered. But in the quiet aftermath of the chamber, their illusions had crumbled. The humans had endured the impossible, adapted faster than any algorithm, and turned the alien machinery against its creators. Edmund glanced at his companions as they walked down the corridor. "It's over," he said softly, though his voice carried the weight of certainty. "They thought they controlled us, but we showed them the truth. Humans are not predictable. We are not fragile. And no machine can bend our minds unless we allow it." Beatrice nodded, her eyes scanning the station for any remaining threats. "They will remember this," she said. "Not just our survival, but the lesson. You cannot underestimate a human mind. And now, they know it the hard way." Rupert walked between them, his broad shoulders relaxed, but his awareness sharp. "We faced their best, and we turned it into our advantage. That is the strength of humanity. Adaptation. Creativity. Calm under pressure. That is something no machine, no matter how advanced, can match." As they moved further into the corridors, the station seemed strangely quiet. The hum of the remaining machinery was soft, almost hesitant, as if the very structure recognized the shift in power. The human steps echoed with purpose, each movement a quiet assertion of freedom. They were no longer captives, they were survivors, victors in a contest of minds that had seemed impossible at the start. Outside, the barren landscapes of Xylar 9 stretched endlessly. Jagged cliffs rose from the ground, and icy winds whipped across the red dust plains. The station floated silently above the planet, a fortress of alien intellect and engineering. And yet, in that vast, cold expanse, humans had triumphed. They had faced advanced technology designed to dominate their very thoughts, and they had turned the challenge into victory. Word of their achievement began to spread across the galaxy, carried by signals intercepted by other species and relayed through networks of curiosity and intelligence. Tales emerged of humans who could not be broken, whose minds were as adaptable as they were resilient. Stories of their calm defiance, their ability to understand and manipulate alien technology, and their sheer determination became a source of awe and inspiration. Even the most advanced alien civilizations began to reconsider their assumptions about humanity. Edmund led the way through the corridors, his mind already assessing the station, the technology, and the next steps. He had learned much during the ordeal, about the machines, about the Zorviths, and about the limits of both human and alien understanding. But more importantly, he had confirmed a truth that had always guided him. The human mind was not to be underestimated. Beatrice walked beside him, her eyes bright with clarity. The experiences of the past days had sharpened her intuition, teaching her to see patterns where none seemed obvious, to find opportunities in the most constrained circumstances. She had learned that even the most intricate systems, designed to control or destroy, could be understood and repurposed when approached with patience, focus, and creativity. Rupert brought up the rear, his steady presence a constant reassurance. He had felt the terror, the pressure, and the uncertainty of the Zorvith attacks, yet he had endured. In the quiet moments between assaults, he had analyzed, observed, and planned. His strength lay not just in physical endurance, but in the ability to remain composed when everything around him seemed to collapse. That composure had become a weapon in itself, one that the Zorviths could not anticipate or counter. As they reached the observation deck, the humans paused. From here, they could see the galaxy stretching infinitely, stars twinkling like scattered gems in the darkness. Planets spun silently, some with life, some barren, all unaware of the small victory that had just occurred on a station floating above a distant red world. The humans stood together, watching, reflecting, and feeling the quiet triumph of survival and strategy. Edmund spoke again, his voice carrying over the soft hum of the station. "This is just one station, one test, one species," he said. "But it shows the truth. We adapt. We endure. We learn faster than anyone expects. And in that, we are stronger than they can imagine." Beatrice's gaze lingered on the stars. "They may have technology, power, and intelligence," she said. "But they do not have what we have: creativity under pressure, the ability to see possibilities where none seem to exist, and the resilience to keep going when all seems lost." Rupert's voice was steady and calm. "We are proof of it, and the galaxy will know it. The Zorviths will remember, and others will hear. Humans cannot be broken. They bend reality itself to survive, adapt, and overcome." Even as they spoke, the Zorviths were still struggling in the background. The remaining scientists were disoriented, their pride shattered. They had thought themselves supreme, masters of thought and control. And yet, they were trapped by their own arrogance, victims of the very machine they had designed. The humans, calm and resolute, had become their teachers without lifting a hand in anger. The corridor doors opened onto a larger deck, where the humans could see the docking bays and the distant stars beyond. Ships floated silently in the void, engines dimmed, waiting for their next command. And here, standing together, the humans understood the full weight of what they had achieved. They had faced what seemed impossible, endured it, and emerged not just unbroken but victorious. Edmund took a deep breath, feeling the satisfaction that comes from true triumph. "We have endured," he said. "We have turned their power against them. And we walk free, unshaken and unafraid." Beatrice smiled faintly, her thoughts calm and clear. This is what it means to be human. Not just to survive, but to master every challenge, to turn adversity into strength, and to prove that nothing, no machine, no species, no force, can predict or break us. Rupert's broad shoulders relaxed slightly, and he nodded. And now the galaxy will see it too. They will know that humans cannot be underestimated. That when challenged, we do not falter. We adapt, we endure, and we emerge stronger than ever. The humans stepped toward the main exit of the station. Each step was deliberate, measured, and full of quiet power. Behind them, the Zorviths remained disoriented, trapped in the aftermath of their own failed experiment. The humans left no destruction, no trace of anger, only the certainty of victory and the lesson that could not be erased. The human mind was not fragile, and it could not be broken. As they passed through the last set of doors, the emptiness of space spread before them. Stars stretched endlessly, planets spun in quiet arcs, and distant lights twinkled like the promise of endless possibilities. The humans walked forward into that vastness, unshaken, aware of their strength, and confident in their resilience. Tales began to spread across the galaxy of what had occurred on Xylar 9. Stories of humans whose minds could not be broken, whose courage and ingenuity had turned the tools of oppression against their creators, reached distant civilizations. Even the most advanced alien intellects learned a vital lesson: underestimate humanity at your peril. The quiet calm and unshakable will of these humans became legend, whispered across star systems and discussed in alien councils alike. Edmund, Beatrice, and Rupert continued walking, their movements measured, their expressions calm. They did not need to celebrate. Their victory was quiet but absolute. They had endured, adapted, and emerged stronger. They had proven that humanity's true strength was not in numbers or technology alone, but in mind, spirit, and the refusal to be broken. The Zorvith Collective, once proud and supreme, would remember this day forever. They had underestimated humans, and in doing so, they had learned a truth that could not be unlearned. Across the galaxy, whispers of awe spread, a testament to resilience, creativity, and the quiet, unstoppable strength of humanity. And as the three humans stepped out into the cold emptiness of space, leaving the station behind, a single thought united them. No matter the challenge, no matter the opponent, humans would endure, adapt, and triumph. The galaxy had learned a simple truth: the human mind bends nothing except the impossible.